Have you ever wondered if the unhappiness you feel is actually real, or if it's just a trick your mind is playing on you? Imagine waking up every morning feeling weighed down by stress, frustration, or even a sense of hopelessness, and never stopping to question where those feelings actually come from. What if I told you that what you're experiencing might not be the result of your circumstances, but a kind of mental illusion, one that's been quietly shaping lives for centuries, not just in faraway cultures, but right here in America? Throughout history, Americans have prided themselves on resilience. From the pioneers who crossed the continent in search of a better life, to the innovators who built the world's most powerful economy, the story of the United States is filled with people overcoming adversity. But even in a country built on optimism and the pursuit of happiness, millions find themselves stuck in cycles of stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. The question is, why? Turns out there's a little-known concept from Japanese philosophy that might hold the answer. It's called Fuko no Sakan, the slope of unhappiness. While it sounds exotic, the idea behind it is surprisingly universal. In fact, if you look back at American history, you'll see echoes of this concept everywhere. During the Great Depression, for example, families who lost everything often described their misfortune as a downward spiral, a series of small setbacks that snowballed into disaster. In the 1970s, psychologists in the US began to study what they called negative momentum, noticing that people who experienced one bad event were more likely to experience another and another until it felt impossible to climb back up. But what if this so-called downward spiral isn't just bad luck or fate? What if it's a pattern, a slope that you can actually recognize and escape from? That's what makes Fuko no Sakan so powerful. It's not just a word, but a way of understanding why we sometimes feel trapped by our own minds and, more importantly, how we can break free. Today, we're going to dive deep into this ancient idea, uncovering how it works, why it matters, and what you can do to stop the slide before it's too late. Because once you see the slope for what it is, you'll never look at your problems or your potential for happiness the same way again. Fuko no Sakan, the words might sound foreign, but the experience is anything but. In fact, the hidden trap of the slope of unhappiness is something that's quietly shaped the lives of countless Americans, even if they've never heard the term. So, what exactly is Fuko no Sakan, and why does it matter so much? At its core, Fuko no Sakan describes a process, not just a feeling. It's the invisible slope you start sliding down when life throws you off balance. It's not a single event, but a chain reaction, a series of small setbacks that, left unchecked, gather speed and pull you further and further from where you want to be. Think about it. How many times have you had a rough morning only to watch the rest of your day unravel? Maybe you spilled your coffee, got stuck in traffic, missed an important meeting, and by the end of the day, you're convinced the universe is out to get you. But is it really fate, or is it the slope at work? This idea isn't just a philosophical curiosity. It's a pattern that's been observed throughout American history. During the economic crashes of the 20th century, for example, families who lost their jobs often found themselves caught in a downward spiral. One missed paycheck led to unpaid bills, which led to mounting debt, which led to stress and arguments at home. Before long, what started as a single setback became a full-blown crisis. The same pattern played out during the 2008 financial meltdown, when millions of Americans watched their fortunes, their homes, and their sense of security slip away, one small loss at a time. A Fuko no Sakan isn't just about money or misfortune. It's about the way our minds react to adversity. In the United States, psychologists have long studied what they call cognitive distortions, the mental habits that make us see the worst in every situation. When you're on the slope, your brain starts to filter out the good and focus only on the bad. Every minor inconvenience feels like proof that things are getting worse. Every mistake becomes a sign that you're failing. And the more you believe it, the faster you slide. What's truly fascinating is how this concept has quietly influenced American culture, even without a name. In the 1980s, self-help gurus talked about breaking the cycle of negativity. In the 1990s, motivational speakers urged people to interrupt the pattern of bad habits. And today, mental health experts warn about the dangers of rumination, the tendency to dwell on problems until they grow out of control. All of these ideas echo the ancient wisdom of Fuko no Sakan, the recognition that unhappiness isn't just something that happens to you, but something that builds step by step unless you find a way to stop it. So why does this hidden trap matter so much? Because once you understand that unhappiness is a slope, not a sentence, you realize you have more power than you think. You're not doomed to keep sliding. You can recognize the pattern, interrupt it, and start climbing back up. And as we'll see, this isn't just theory, it's a skill that anyone can learn no matter where they start. The real question is, are you ready to see the slope in your own life? Because the moment you do, everything changes. The downward spiral rarely announces itself with a crash. More often, it begins with something so small, so ordinary that you barely notice it. Maybe it's a restless night, a missed alarm, or a single harsh word exchanged over breakfast. In America, where the pace of life is relentless and expectations run high, these little moments can feel like nothing more than background noise. But for many, they're the first pebbles that start an avalanche. Consider the story of countless Americans who wake up each day already feeling behind. The United States is a country built on the idea of progress, always moving forward, always striving for more. But what happens when you stumble? For some, it's just a bad day. For others, it's the start of something much bigger. The concept of Fuko no Sakan, the slope of unhappiness, explains why. It's not the size of the setback that matters, but the momentum it creates. One small slip can set off a chain reaction, and before you know it, you're sliding faster than you ever thought possible. History is full of examples. During the Great Recession of 2008, millions of Americans lost their jobs almost overnight. For many, the initial shock was just the beginning. A missed mortgage payment led to a foreclosure notice. The loss of a home led to strained relationships, health problems, and a sense of hopelessness that seemed impossible to shake. What started as a single event quickly became a series of blows, each one making it harder to recover. Psychologists call this cascading stress, and it's a phenomenon that's been studied in American universities for decades. The more setbacks you experience, the more likely you are to expect them, and the more you expect them, the more you notice every little thing that goes wrong. But the downward spiral isn't always triggered by something as dramatic as a financial crisis. Sometimes it's the slow accumulation of everyday frustrations. Maybe you're juggling work, family, and bills, and you start skipping meals or losing sleep. You snap at your partner, avoid your friends, and stop doing the things that once brought you joy. In the United States, where self-reliance is often celebrated, it's easy to keep your struggles to yourself, hoping things will get better on their own. But as the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, the slope gets steeper. The more you isolate yourself, the louder your negative thoughts become. The more you dwell on your problems, the more overwhelming they seem. This pattern isn't just anecdotal, it's backed by science. In the 1970s, American researchers began to study what they called learned helplessness. They found that when people faced repeated setbacks, they eventually stopped trying to change their situation, even when escape was possible. The mind, it turns out, can become trapped in its own narrative of defeat. More recently, studies at major U.S. universities have shown that chronic stress actually changes the brain, making it harder to break free from negative thinking. The slope of unhappiness isn't just a metaphor, it's a measurable process that affects millions of lives. Yet despite all this, the downward spiral remains largely invisible. It doesn't make headlines or trend on social media. It happens quietly behind closed doors in the spaces between work and home, in the moments when you're alone with your thoughts. And because it's so gradual, most people don't realize they're on the slope until they've already picked up speed. But here's the truth, the slope doesn't care who you are or where you come from. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO in New York or a student in rural Ohio. The process is the same. One small problem leads to another and another until you're caught in a cycle that feels impossible to escape. The good news is, recognizing how the spiral starts is the first step to stopping it. And as we'll see, there are ways to interrupt the pattern, ways that have been tested not just in ancient philosophy but in the lived experience of Americans throughout history. The question is, will you notice the slope before it's too late, or will you let it carry you further down? Recognizing the slope is the moment everything changes. It's the split second when you realize you're not just having a string of bad days, you're caught in a pattern, and that pattern has a name. In the United States, where the culture often encourages people to tough it out and keep moving forward, this moment of recognition can be both liberating and unsettling. For generations, Americans have been taught to believe that hard work and determination can overcome any obstacle. But what happens when the real obstacle is invisible, quietly shaping your thoughts and actions from the inside out? Throughout American history, there have been countless stories of people who hit rock bottom before they even realized they were falling. During the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, families in the Midwest watched their crops fail year after year. At first, it was just a dry season, then another. Then the dust storms came, and suddenly entire communities were forced to abandon their homes. Many survivors later described a sense of numbness, a gradual loss of hope that crept in long before they packed up and left. It wasn't just the land that was eroding, it was their sense of control over their own lives. This is the essence of Fuko no Sakan, the slow, almost imperceptible slide that only becomes obvious when you look back and see how far you've come. In modern America, the slope can take many forms. Maybe it's the young professional in a big city, working long hours and telling themselves that exhaustion is just part of the grind. Maybe it's the single parent, juggling two jobs and barely making ends meet, who starts to believe that stress and fatigue are simply the price of survival. Or maybe it's the college student overwhelmed by debt and expectations who begins to withdraw from friends and activities, convinced that no one else could possibly understand. In each case, the slope is there, silent, steady, and easy to ignore until it's almost too late. What makes recognizing the slope so difficult is that it often disguises itself as normal life. In the US, where busyness is worn like a badge of honor, it's easy to mistake chronic stress for ambition or to see isolation as independence. The warning signs irritability, fatigue, loss of interest are often dismissed as temporary setbacks, but as psychologists have pointed out, these are the very symptoms that signal the start of a downward spiral. The longer you ignore them, the steeper the slope becomes. Interestingly, there's been a quiet shift in recent years. Some of America's largest companies, especially in the tech sector, have started to take mental health more seriously. Rumors suggest that a few forward-thinking firms are even borrowing from Eastern philosophies like Fuko no Sakan, teaching employees to spot the early signs of burnout before it turns into a crisis. Workshops on mindful awareness and pattern interruption are becoming more common, and some HR departments are quietly tracking employee well-being, looking for the subtle clues that someone might be sliding down the slope. While these efforts are still new and sometimes controversial, they reflect a growing recognition that the real battle isn't just against external challenges, but against the invisible patterns that shape our inner lives. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Critics argue that these programs are just window dressing, a way for companies to avoid addressing deeper issues like overwork and job insecurity. Some say that teaching people to recognize the slope is just another way of putting the burden back on individuals, rather than fixing the systems that create stress in the first place. But even these critics admit that awareness is a powerful tool. After all, you can't change what you can't see. For individuals, the turning point often comes in a quiet moment, a late-night realization, a conversation with a friend, or a sudden flash of insight during a walk in the park. It's the moment you stop blaming bad luck or other people and start asking, when did this all begin? Sometimes it's as simple as tracing your steps back to a single missed opportunity, a conversation you avoided, or a habit you let slide. Other times, it's a more gradual awakening, a slow dawning that you've been living on autopilot, letting the slope carry you further and further from the life you want. The truth is, recognizing the slope doesn't solve everything overnight, but it does give you a choice. It's the first step toward reclaiming your sense of agency, your ability to act rather than react. And as American history has shown time and again, the power to change often begins with a single moment of clarity, a decision to stop sliding and start climbing, no matter how steep the hill may seem. The question is, will you recognize the slope in your own life before it's too late? Or will you wait until the bottom is in sight? The answer, as always, is up to you. So what do you do once you realize you're on the slope? This is where ancient wisdom meets modern life, and where the lessons of the past can offer a lifeline to anyone feeling stuck. The Japanese samurai, centuries ago, faced battles not just on the field but within their own minds. They understood that the greatest enemy was often invisible, a slow erosion of discipline, focus, and hope. Their answer was a set of rituals and practices designed to break the momentum of the downward spiral and rebuild strength from the inside out. But this isn't just a story from distant lands. America, too, has a long tradition of turning to ritual and routine in times of crisis. During the Great Depression, families across the country clung to daily habits, Sunday dinners, church services, even simple chores, as a way to create stability when everything else felt uncertain. Soldiers returning from World War II often spoke about the power of routine to help them readjust to civilian life. In the 21st century, as Americans face new kinds of stress, digital overload, economic uncertainty, and social isolation, the search for grounding rituals has only intensified. The samurai's approach, known in Japan as kaizen when applied to improvement, was about small, deliberate actions. But when it comes to Fuko no Sakan, the focus is on three key steps: recognition, interruption, and reconstruction. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're practical tools that anyone can use no matter where they live or what challenges they face. Recognition is the first and hardest step. It means admitting that you're on the slope, that your problems aren't just random misfortunes but part of a pattern. In the US, this can be especially tough. The culture of self-reliance and pull yourself up by your bootstraps can make it hard to acknowledge when you need help. But as countless Americans have discovered, whether during the farm crises of the 1980s or the opioid epidemic of recent years, denial only makes the slope steeper. The real strength lies in facing the truth, however uncomfortable it may be. Interruption is the next move. The samurai believed that you can't climb uphill while you're still rolling down, you have to stop the slide first. In practical terms, this means doing anything differently. For some, it's as simple as changing a morning routine, reaching out to a friend, or taking a walk instead of stewing in negative thoughts. In American history, moments of interruption have often come from unexpected places. A neighbor's kindness during hard times, a community rallying after a disaster, or a personal decision to seek therapy or join a support group. These small acts can break the chain of negativity and create space for something new. Reconstruction is where the real work begins. The samurai built friction against the slope through daily rituals, meditation, physical training, tea ceremonies that anchored them in the present and reminded them of their purpose. In the US, people have found their own versions of these rituals. For some, it's morning coffee and journaling. For others, it's regular exercise, volunteering, or family traditions. The key is consistency. By building habits that support well-being, you create barriers against the slide, making it harder for setbacks to knock you off course. Of course, not everyone agrees on the best way to rebuild. Some critics argue that these rituals are just old wine in new bottles, that Americans have always found ways to cope, whether through religion, community, or self-help. But the evidence is clear. People who create structure in their lives are more resilient, more hopeful, and better able to weather life's storms. Even in the face of controversy, the core idea remains powerful. You don't have to accept the slope as your fate. You can interrupt the pattern and start building your way back up. In the end, the ancient solution isn't about perfection or never falling down. It's about having the tools to catch yourself, to pause, and to rebuild one small step at a time. And as history shows, those small steps can make all the difference, turning the tide not just for individuals but for entire communities. The question is, what ritual will you choose to anchor yourself when the slope appears? Because the right habit, practiced daily, can be the difference between sliding further down and starting the climb back up. Once you understand the slope and the ancient wisdom behind stopping it, the next question is, how do you actually start climbing back up? This is where philosophy meets action and where the lessons of the past become a practical roadmap for today. In Japan, the samurai had their rituals. In America, we've always had our own ways of facing adversity, whether it was the settlers forging new lives on the frontier or families banding together during the toughest years of the Great Depression. The common thread is this: real change starts with small, intentional steps. That's why the 7-day challenge is so powerful. It's not about overhauling your entire life overnight. It's about building momentum one day at a time and proving to yourself that you can interrupt the slope and start moving upward. This approach echoes the American spirit of self-improvement, the belief that anyone can make a comeback, no matter how far they've fallen. Day 1, identify and solve the first problem. The first step is to pinpoint the moment things started to slide. Maybe it was a missed deadline at work, a fight with a loved one, or simply letting your health slip. In American history, this kind of self-reflection has been the turning point for many. During the civil rights movement, for example, leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. often spoke about the importance of recognizing the root causes of injustice before real change could begin. On a personal level, it's about honesty, admitting where things went wrong and taking one concrete action to address it. Maybe you go to bed earlier or finally have that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Day 2, do something you've been avoiding. Procrastination is a universal human experience, but in the US, where productivity is king, it can feel especially shameful. The challenge here is to face one task you've been putting off. It could be as simple as answering an email or as big as reaching out for help. American pioneers didn't survive by ignoring problems, they tackled them head-on, one obstacle at a time. Day 3, help someone else. One of the most effective ways to break out of a negative spiral is to shift your focus outward. Volunteering and community service have deep roots in American culture, from the barn raisings of early settlers to the mutual aid networks that sprang up during the COVID-19 pandemic. When you help someone else, you remind yourself that you're part of something bigger, and you create positive momentum that can carry you forward. Day 4, move your body. Physical activity has always been a cornerstone of American life, whether it's sports, hiking, or simply taking a walk. The mind and body are deeply connected, and movement can be a powerful way to interrupt negative thought patterns. During the 20th century, programs like the President's Council on Physical Fitness encouraged Americans to stay active as a way to build resilience and health. Even a short walk can make a difference. Day 5, write down 3 things that went right. Gratitude journaling might sound like a modern trend, but the idea of counting your blessings is as old as America itself. During hard times, families would gather around the dinner table and share what they were thankful for, even if it was just a roof over their heads. By focusing on what's going well, you train your brain to see possibilities instead of problems. Day 6, reconnect with someone. Isolation is one of the most dangerous aspects of the slope. In the US, where independence is highly valued, it's easy to withdraw when things get tough, but history shows that connection is key to survival. During World War II, letters from home kept soldiers going. During the pandemic, video calls and neighborhood check-ins became lifelines. Reaching out to a friend or family member can be the spark that reignites hope. Day 7. Do something just for pleasure. Americans are often taught to value productivity above all else, but joy is just as important. Whether it's listening to music, going to a baseball game, or simply enjoying a favorite meal, taking time for pleasure is a way to remind yourself that life is about more than just getting by. It's about living. The beauty of the 7-day challenge is that it's both ancient and modern, rooted in the wisdom of the samurai and the lived experience of generations of Americans. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. If you miss a day, you start again. If you stumble, you get back up. This is the American way: resilience, reinvention, and the belief that no matter how steep the slope, you can always find a way back up. So, as you take on this challenge, remember that you're not alone. You're part of a long tradition of people who have faced adversity and found a way to rise. The slope may be real, but so is your power to climb. The only question is, are you ready to take the first step? The idea of the slope of unhappiness might sound like ancient philosophy, but modern science in the United States has been uncovering the same truths for decades. In fact, some of the most groundbreaking research on how negative momentum works and how to reverse it has come from American universities and psychologists. The story of Fuko no Sakan isn't just a tale from the East. It's a concept that's been quietly validated in labs, clinics, and counseling offices across the country. Back in the 1970s, American psychologist Martin Seligman introduced the world to the concept of learned helplessness. Through a series of experiments, Seligman discovered that when people and even animals are exposed to repeated setbacks or uncontrollable stress, they eventually stop trying to change their situation, even when escape is possible. This research, conducted at the University of Pennsylvania, laid the foundation for what we now understand as the downward spiral, a self-reinforcing cycle where each negative experience makes it harder to break free from the next. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the science has only gotten more precise. Dr. James Pennebaker, a clinical psychologist at the University of Texas, has spent years studying what he calls rumination spirals. His research shows that when people get stuck in negative thought patterns, their brain chemistry actually changes. Stress hormones like cortisol rise, while feel-good chemicals like serotonin drop. The longer someone stays in this state, the more their brain adapts to negativity, making it even harder to see a way out. This isn't just a metaphorical slope, it's a biological one with real consequences for mental and physical health. But here, where the story takes a hopeful turn, American researchers have also found that small, consistent interventions can completely reverse this process. You don't need a dramatic life overhaul or years of therapy to start climbing back up. In fact, studies show that simple actions, like writing down what you're grateful for, reaching out to a friend, or even taking a short walk, can begin to shift brain chemistry back toward balance. This echoes the ancient wisdom of the samurai who used daily rituals to create friction against the slope. In modern terms, it's about building habits that interrupt the cycle of negativity and create new, positive momentum. The science also explains why the 7-day challenge works. Each step, whether it's solving a small problem, helping someone else, or reconnecting with a loved one, acts as a micro-intervention. Over time, these small wins add up, retraining the brain to expect good things and to notice opportunities instead of obstacles. This is the same principle behind cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT), a method developed and popularized in the United States. CBT teaches people to recognize negative patterns, challenge them, and replace them with healthier habits. Critics sometimes argue that ideas like Fuko no Sakan are just Eastern versions of Western psychology, but the truth is, both traditions point to the same reality: the mind is powerful, and the patterns we follow shape our lives. Of course, not everyone agrees on the best way to apply these insights. Some American mental health experts warn against toxic positivity, the idea that you should ignore real problems and just think happy thoughts. But the science is clear: it's not about denying reality, but about taking small, intentional steps to change it. The slope of unhappiness is real, but so is the path back up. Throughout American history, this blend of science and self-help has shaped the national conversation about mental health. From the rise of support groups in the 1980s to the explosion of wellness apps and mindfulness programs today, the search for practical solutions has always been at the heart of the American experience. The message is simple: you're not powerless. With the right tools and a willingness to act, you can change your trajectory, no matter how far you've slid. So the next time you feel yourself caught in a downward spiral, remember, you're not alone and you're not stuck. The science, the history, and the wisdom of both East and West all point to the same truth. The slope can be steep, but every step you take, no matter how small, can start to turn things around. The real question is, will you use what we now know to change your story? because the power to climb is and always has been in your hands. If the slope of unhappiness can quietly pull you down, is there an opposite force that can lift you up? The answer, rooted in both ancient philosophy and modern American experience, is a resounding yes. In Japan, this concept is known as ko no Sakan, the slope of happiness. It's the idea that just as negative momentum can drag you lower, positive momentum can propel you higher, often with surprising speed. And while the term might be unfamiliar in the United States, the principle is woven into the fabric of American history. Think about the stories that have shaped the American spirit. From the earliest days, the nation has celebrated the power of small beginnings. The first settlers, facing harsh winters and uncertain futures, survived not through grand gestures but through daily acts of cooperation and hope. Each successful harvest, each new friendship, each small victory built on the last, creating a sense of upward momentum that carried communities through even the darkest times. This upward slope is more than just optimism, it's a practical, repeatable process. In the 20th century, American psychologists began to study what they called upward spirals. Researchers like Barbara Fredrickson at the University of North Carolina found that positive emotions, joy, gratitude, interest, love, don't just feel good in the moment. They actually broaden your perspective, increase your resilience, and make it easier to build more positive experiences. In other words, one good thing leads to another, and before you know it, you're not just avoiding the descent, you're climbing higher than you thought possible. The American self-help movement has long embraced this idea, even if it used different language. In the 1930s, during the depths of the Great Depression, the Think and Grow Rich philosophy encouraged people to focus on what they could control, to celebrate small wins and to build on them. In the 1980s and 90s, the rise of motivational speakers and life coaches brought the message to millions. Success is a series of small, positive steps, repeated over time. Today, the explosion of wellness apps, gratitude journals, and mindfulness practices all reflect the same truth: happiness is not a destination, but a direction. But here, where the story gets even more interesting, the upward slope isn't just about personal happiness, it's about community too. Throughout American history, movements for social change have gained momentum in exactly this way. The civil rights movement, for example, was built on countless small acts of courage and kindness. Each protest, each conversation, each new ally added to the momentum, until what once seemed impossible became inevitable. The same pattern can be seen in the fight for women's rights, LGBTQ+ equality, and countless other causes. When people come together, support each other, and celebrate progress, the upward slope becomes unstoppable. Of course, the journey isn't always smooth. There are setbacks, disappointments, and days when the climb feels steep. But the lesson of both ancient wisdom and American experience is clear. The more you practice positive habits, the easier it becomes to keep going. Each act of kindness, each moment of gratitude, each step toward your goals adds friction against the pull of negativity and makes the next step a little bit easier. Some skeptics argue that focusing on the positive is just wishful thinking, or that it ignores the real challenges people face. But the science and the stories of millions of Americans tell a different story. Building an upward slope doesn't mean denying reality. It means choosing again and again to take small actions that move you in the right direction. It means recognizing that happiness, like unhappiness, is a pattern, a slope you can climb one step at a time. So if you've ever wondered whether it's possible to turn things around, to not just escape the slope of unhappiness but to build a life that feels lighter, brighter, and more meaningful, the answer is yes. The path is real and it's open to anyone willing to take the first step. The only question is, will you choose to climb? Because the secret to lasting happiness isn't a secret at all, it's a slope waiting for you to start the ascent. At the end of the day, the story of the slope, whether it's pulling you down or lifting you up, comes down to a single powerful truth: the choice is yours. This isn't just a lesson from ancient Japanese philosophy or a theory from modern psychology. It's a reality that has played out time and again across American history, shaping the lives of individuals, families, and entire communities. Think back to some of the most defining moments in the United States. During the Great Depression, when hope seemed lost and the country was gripped by fear, millions of Americans faced a choice. Would they let the slope of despair carry them further down, or would they find a way to climb back up? The answer came in the form of small, everyday acts of courage: neighbors sharing food, families pooling resources, communities coming together to build something better. These choices, repeated across the nation, didn't just help people survive, they helped America recover and thrive. The same pattern emerged during the Civil Rights era. Faced with overwhelming odds and entrenched injustice, ordinary people made extraordinary choices. They chose to march, to speak out, to stand together in the face of violence and hatred. Each act of bravery, each refusal to give in to despair added momentum to the upward slope of progress. History remembers the leaders, but it was the collective choice of countless individuals that changed the course of the nation. On a personal level, the choice is just as real. Maybe you're facing challenges that feel insurmountable: financial stress, relationship struggles, health issues, or the quiet weight of anxiety and self-doubt. It's easy to believe that you're powerless, that the slope is too steep, that your circumstances are set in stone. But the truth, proven by both science and the stories of those who came before you, is that you always have a choice. You can recognize the pattern, interrupt the slide, and start building your way back up, one small step at a time. This isn't about pretending that problems don't exist or ignoring the realities of life. It's about reclaiming your agency, your ability to act, and your right to hope. The slope of unhappiness is real, but so is the slope of happiness. Both are built moment by moment, decision by decision. The difference between those who stay trapped and those who break free isn't luck or talent. It's the willingness to choose again and again, to take action, to reach out, to try something new. In today's America, where the pace of change can feel overwhelming and the pressures of daily life are higher than ever, this message is more important than ever. The tools are there: ancient wisdom, modern science, and the lived experience of millions who have faced the slope and found a way up. The question is, will you use them? Will you be the one who recognizes the first slip, who interrupts the pattern, who builds the habits that create upward momentum? As you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, are you on the slope right now? When did it start? What was the first problem you ignored, the first habit you let slide? And more importantly, what's the first step you can take today to change direction? Maybe it's reaching out to a friend, starting a gratitude journal, or simply deciding to get up and move. Whatever it is, know that you're not alone. You're part of a long, proud tradition of Americans who have faced adversity and chosen to rise. So as you finish this video, remember, the choice is yours. The slope doesn't control you, you control your next move. Will you keep sliding, or will you start to climb? The answer, as always, is in your hands, and if you're ready to take that first step, you might just find that the climb is not only possible but transformative. Because in the end, the real story of the slope isn't about falling, it's about rising together, one choice at a time.